I'll just do it in order of closeness to me. Mr. Marty Nothstein, who is a Republican candidate for Congress. Ms. Susan Watt, who is the Democratic candidate for Congress. And Mr. Tim Silfies, the Libertarian candidate for Congress. At this point, we can give them a warm welcome. And with that warm welcome, I will now ask you not to give another welcome, or at least appreciation, until our close of our debate tonight. So we won't be interrupted by applause. I'm sure everybody would love to give a warm round of applause at the end of the evening for our candidates sharing, but we don't want to interrupt the evening with lots of applause that we've been waiting for. Which goes also into the general tenor of the evening. This is a respectful, powerful evening of dialogue and hearing from the candidates. We will be respectful. I know this community is one that demands respect, and that respect will be part of this evening. So we'll have a great chance to thank our candidates after the evening with a warm round of applause. You come and thank them personally after, but we'll keep the evening going. So with that, let's start the evening. Per our selection process, Mr. Nothstein will have the opening comments, and for opening comments, you're welcome to come up to the podium. So, Mr. Nothstein.
Thank you, Dr. Ward, and my condolences for the passing of Mr. Nothstein as well. My name is Marty Nothstein. I'm running to be your next congressman. I can tell people I have more than a resume, I have a story. I was born and raised right here in the Lehigh Valley. I've lived here my entire life. My wife and I raised our family here, and I love calling it home. For the first part of my life, I trained to be one of the best athletes in the world, more specifically the fastest man on the bicycle. Required a lot of early mornings, late evenings, quite a few disappointments. But despite all the disappointments and setbacks, I kept at it. I worked very, very hard. I became a national champion when I was only 16 years old. Became a world champion when I was 22. I won an Olympic silver medal in 1996 in a photo finish that took 15 minutes for the officials to decide who won. I still think I won that race today. 18 years ago, I went back to the Olympic Games in Sydney, Australia, and won that Olympic gold medal and brought it back home here to Lehigh Valley. Towards the end of my cycling career, I built a business. Started my life as a small business owner. I built a car wash business from the ground up. My wife and I still own and operate that car wash business today. I bought farmland and farmed my own property, owned and farmed my family's farm. I was newly elected to the Lehigh County Board of Commissioners 3 years ago, and I've been chairing the board for the last 2 years. I've paid the lowest millage rate for homeowners in 27 years. We made a $6 to $8 million commitment to protect our Lehigh County nursing home and protect our seniors. What's the connecting thread to all this? Most importantly, I should say, is knowing what matters. Getting started and not stopping until the job gets done. So we have an election on November 6th. I'm not just a guy who raced a bicycle. I'm the guy who won an Olympic gold medal. I'm the guy who built a business from the ground up. I'm the guy that leads the Lehigh County Board of Commissioners, the guy who farms his own land. I'm going to be your next congressman. So thank you for having me. I look forward to getting tonight's forum underway. So thank you.
Mr. Nothstein. Ms. Watt.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I'm Susan Wild, and I'm running to be the first congresswoman from the Lehigh Valley. We're gathering here tonight at a sad moment. I can't help but keep thinking that Mark Goldstein should be seated right here in the front row, because this is exactly the kind of thing that he would be so passionate about and felt so strongly about. I feel as though we've really lost a friend and a leader in our Jewish community. We know that he made it his career to strengthen ties between our communities and the United States and Israel. And I personally was so grateful for his friendship over the years. The last conversation I had with Mark related to his request that I make sure to get an absentee ballot. Sadly, he was never able to file it, but I feel honored that he asked that of me. May his memory be a blessing. Many of you know me through my involvement with the Jewish community here, but for those of you who don't know me, I have been here for 30 years. I'm the only one up here who wasn't born and raised here, because I come from a military family. My father was in the Air Force, and as a result, we moved every couple of years. I put myself through college, and then I became the first lawyer in my family with the help of the federal government with student loans. And I've since practiced law right here in the Lehigh Valley for the last 30 years. I've long since paid back those student loans. I feel that a good government is one that invests in its future generations, and that's something we've lost sight of, I'm afraid. And it's one of the main motivating factors for why I'm in this race. My two children were born right here in the Lehigh Valley. They were raised here and they went to public schools here, although they both started their education right in this building. I feel as though fewer Americans today have opportunities like I had to go to law school, because I feel that our government's broken, and I feel that we have to change the people that we send to Washington in order to fix it. Thank you. I look forward to this forum this evening.
Thanks, Ms. Wild, and Mr. Silfies.
Hello. My condolences as well about Mr. Goldstein. I never met him, so I wish I would have. It sounds great. So my name's Tim Silfies, as he said. I was born and raised in Bethlehem. I'm a little different in that I'm a creature of television. My father and my mother met at the public television station here. My mom, some of you might know, is Shelley Brown, who she was on PBS and moved on to the State Theater. And my father was a director there, and he became a director then for World Wrestling Entertainment. So two very divergent paths of television came together to create whatever it is that I am. So I also went into television. I worked for many years at Fox News Channel, where I worked for Governor John Kasich, Greta Van Susteren, John Stossel for a long time, and then I co-created a couple shows for Fox Business. While I worked there, I saw up close the way that I felt more and more the establishment parties of the country became more and more polarized and just stopped functioning the way they were supposed to. And after that, I came home, and for a time I was a business reporter for 69 News. And it was then that I saw the way that dysfunction affects all of us in our community. And I saw the way we're the ones who are left with broken, dysfunctional government. So that's why I decided to get into this race outside of the two major parties. So I'm looking forward to talking tonight, and thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Silfies, and thank you to the three candidates for their opening remarks. We are going to go directly into questions. So the order of the first question will start with Mr. Silfies, and then go to Mr. Nothstein, and then Ms. Wild, and we're going to rotate for the rest of the evening. The first question is, how would you characterize the current U.S. approach to the Arab-Israeli conflict? What would you do differently, and what steps do you think the United States should take to promote bilateral negotiations between Israel and the Palestinians? Mr. Silfies.
So, I think at the moment, we're frustratingly far away from peace. I myself, my personal philosophy of foreign policy, I tend to be a non-interventionist, meaning I think the United States, as much as possible, should try to stay out of entanglements and try to maintain a posture where we are not involved in conflicts unless we have been attacked ourselves. That said, I think this situation is unique because over so many decades, the United States has been assumed and expected to have the role of a neutral arbiter to help negotiate Middle East peace. And I think that is something that we should continue to do. And that's something that I believe, inevitably leads us to the conclusion of having to help and encourage as much as possible a two-state solution to this problem. And I fear that we are frustratingly further away from that than we've been in a long time. But I still think that it's something that always needs to be our goal and that we always are pushing towards. So I think that ultimately working with Israel and other allies in the Middle East to push for peace, not just there, but other hotspots, which hopefully we'll talk about tonight, like Iran, Yemen, and Syria, and places that are really dangerous and present huge problems, not just us, but for the world. I think we should always be working as much as we possibly can towards lessening conflict and peace.
Thank you very much. Ms. Watt.
At the end of the day, I believe that only a negotiated agreement between the two parties will ever achieve a lasting peace. Having said that, I feel very strongly that the United States always has to support Israel. We have to maintain our close relationship. It's an economic relationship as much as it is an issue of Israel's security and our own security. And it's something that's incredibly important to me personally. I think that the United States can't impose any solutions on the parties, but we should be there to be part of the framework. We need to be there to encourage negotiations between them. We need to be there to encourage trust-building measures. But in the end, what we absolutely must do is always preserve our very strong relationship with Israel.
Very good. Mr. Nothstein.
Yes, Israel is the best hope of peace in the Middle East. We all know that. And really, a two-state solution only works if the Palestinians want it to work. They have to stop wanting to destroy Israel. And simply, as your next congressman, I'll always be a stalwart for Israel. But right now, our partnership with Israel is one of the most important things that we have in the Middle East. It's something that we need to continue working on and fighting for. Israel's here, it's here to stay. Palestinians need to know that a two-state solution needs to happen. And really, we would have had a two-state solution many years ago, but I think the Palestinians walked away from the negotiating table, and then when Israel was willing to give them a lot of concessions at that. So, two-state solution, something needs to happen, but it'll only happen when Palestinians recognize that Israel as a state, and they can recognize it.
Great, thank you so much. We're going to move to our second question. Ms. Wild will be the first to address this. Anti-Semitism and hate crimes against Jews are on the rise around the world and in the United States. This past year in the U.S., we experienced the largest single-year increase of anti-Semitic incidents on record. What actions should the U.S. government take to protect its citizens from anti-Semitism specifically and from religious discrimination and hate crimes more generally? Ms. Wild.
Well, let me start by saying that as a Jewish candidate running in 2018, I feel a particular responsibility to stand up and speak out against this phenomenon. I have to tell you that just within the last week, in my campaign headquarters, the public restroom was defaced with swastikas and white supremacist comments. It's hit very close to home. I also have two children who I've mentioned before who are in their mid-20s. Both of them are on college campuses. So the rising incidence of anti-Semitism on college campuses and throughout the United States is of great concern to me. I was very, very concerned when what we saw last year in Charlottesville occurred and the president equivocated, and rather than condemning neo-Nazis, he alluded to them there being fine people on both sides, and that to me is just plain wrong. It sends the wrong message to the American people. I think one of the things we have to do are the kinds of things that are being done right here in the community, right at Muhlenberg College, where we have the Institute for Christian-Jewish Understanding. I think it's a wonderful program. We need more of that throughout the country. I also am very much a supporter of Congressman Ted Deutsch's bipartisan Anti-Semitism Awareness Act. I think that Congress has to take a lead in combating anti-Semitism, and that the example of that has to start with our government.
Mr. Nothstein.
Thank you. Let me first start by saying hate is wrong and dangerous no matter where it comes from. But unfortunately, it's becoming more prevalent than ever in this country. A recent report came out saying that 72% of all religious-based hate crimes in Los Angeles were against Jews. And unfortunately, I think the greatest perpetrators are the left wing of the Democratic Party. Louis Farrakhan just recently called Jews termites eating the world from the inside out. Nobody on the left condemned him. The women's marches have consistently displayed anti-Semitic views and actions. Nobody on the left condemned them. Radical college leaders deny access to conservative speakers. Nobody on the left condemns them. And it needs to end. So I would like to ask my opponent, Susan, to go on the record condemning them without condition and condemn the officials of the Democratic Party that support it, many of whom are members of the caucus that she's been supported by as well.
Mr. Silfies.
I wish I had more of the solutions to problems like this. I mean, these are things that have plagued our world for hundreds of years. And if I were smart enough to know the answer to that, I probably shouldn't even be here. I probably should be doing something else. What I think the best thing we can possibly do is to talk to one another more and to try to understand each other more, because this country right now and the world, but specifically us, the temperature is so high in this country right now, and the amount of division is so stark, not just politically, but also, as we're talking about here, you know, the way we treat each other as groups is it's very upsetting. And I think rather than a left-right thing, there's plenty of hate to go around, I think that really the solutions to these, I would argue, are less about government, less about what government can do about it, and more about what we can do about it. All of us sitting right here, we're the ones that should think about and talk to each other and start with ourselves and our communities and look for less solutions from people hundreds of miles away.
Thank you very much. We're going to move to the third question. We're going to go back to the opening order, and it's going to be from Mr. Nothstein first. The boycott, divestment, and sanctions, or BDS movement on U.S. college campuses has spawned anti-Israel activity, including calls for academic boycott, and in many instances created a hostile environment for Jewish and pro-Israeli students. What measures should be taken to safeguard against such discrimination and marginalization of students, while at the same time protecting the freedom of expression and inquiry essential to an academic environment?
Thank you. Every person has a right to religious beliefs, and everyone's religious beliefs need to be protected. We're entitled to these beliefs. Angry people and terrorists don't control them, both domestic and foreign. They can't be taken away. God gave us those rights. They weren't given to us by politicians. They weren't given to us by an extremist group. Religious freedom has served us and will be a safe harbor for countless groups of oppressed refugees from all over the world, not only college students, but people throughout the entire world. Both the U.S. and Israel were settled by immigrants looking for independence in the quest for religious freedom. Few things are more critical to liberty than religious freedom, whether it's on a college campus or worshiping in your place of worship. And really, religious freedom is really the only thing that separates the role of government from somebody's true belief in life. So it's something that we need to maintain. It's something I will fight for. Religious freedom in the U.S. is very important, no matter where it is.
Ms. Weil.
I firmly oppose the BDS movement. I want to go to Washington to work on a bipartisan basis for closer ties between the U.S. and Israel, and to continue to support everything that we do currently with Israel and more, and expand upon it. We can build on the academic, the entrepreneurial, and the security ties we have that benefit both of our countries greatly. America's a free country. We have freedom of speech and protest, and nothing Congress does or should do should affect that. Just as Israel is a free country and is a democracy, where its own citizens frequently raise their own voices in protest. But having said that, I think the best response to the BDS movement is for leaders, for our government, for members of Congress to discourage it and to work, as I said, to build even closer relationships with Israel and to explain the importance of our relationship with Israel.
And Mr. Silfies.
I think I agree with some of what I just heard from both of my opponents, in the sense that I think religious freedom really is one of the cornerstones of the United States. I am very much a constitutionalist, and I believe in the entire document. And this is built into it, and it's one of the most important things, as people having the right to worship how they want. That is a key component of what it means to have individual liberty, which I think is the cornerstone of the entire country. I also think, as Susan was saying, speech is important too, and people have the right to say stupid things, and people have the right to say what they believe about anything, and that should be protected as well. And we should always respect that balance of what we have in the United States, the liberty across the board.
Thank you, Mr. Silfies. We're going to come right back to you. You get the first chance for this question. And it continues on with the BDS movement, whose stated political goal is to undermine the legitimacy of the Jewish state. What are your thoughts on the BDS movement more broadly, and what would you do to combat delegitimization efforts against Israel? That's back to you.
Yeah, I mean, Israel is a legitimate state, and we cannot ever, speaking out and establishing that, and all of us acknowledging that it's a legitimate state, and that it's one of our key allies, and it's, as we've talked about, a stabilizing force in the Middle East, is a very important part of how we're going to move forward to get more peace in the Middle East across the board, as we've talked about. And again, I go back to the fact that there are so many things happening in the Middle East right now, whether it's in Syria, whether it's in Iran, whether it's in Yemen, that are so concerning and that are so, tens of thousands of people are dying right now in Yemen and Syria. And these places that we have to work towards peace at all times in those areas.
Mr. Nothstein.
Yes, in today's world, the United States has few allies as steadfast as Israel, the state of Israel, I'll say. Our two countries have a lot of shared value of freedom, democracy, progress, rule of law, provide the foundations for deep diplomatic ties, including our military. In our determination to defeat terror and bigotry, and also in our desire to serve examples to the world, the United States and Israel must always stand together. The recent move to the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem is a great first step. It was done by this current administration. It was significant. To signal to the world that the U.S. recognized Jerusalem as a true capital. So the alliance between the United States and Israel is strong, getting stronger, but there's no room for complacency. It's vitally important to maintain that partnership, and to always have Israel as our partner in the Middle East.
Ms. Well.
Well, as I've already said, I strongly oppose the BDS movement. A strong U.S.-Israel relationship is of great personal importance to me. I was bat mitzvahed in Israel, as was my daughter. Both of my kids were fortunate enough to go to Israel on the Birthright program. And one of the main reasons I want to go to Congress is to approach the relationship with Israel on a bipartisan basis. This is not a partisan issue, nor should it be. It's the only democracy in the Middle East. We have strong economic ties. Israel's security is our security. And I think that our government must not be doing a good enough job of explaining just how vital the relationship is with Israel. Because I don't believe that people really generally understand just how vital it is. We have to continue to support the close economic ties. We have to make sure that Israel has a qualitative military edge. Right here in Pennsylvania, I'm proud that we have more than $4 billion worth of two-way trade with Israel just from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So our relationship is incredibly important, but for all of us.
You folks have headed in the direction of the next question already, so I'll give you some chances to talk more about that or possibly reframe it. So how would you characterize the U.S.-Israeli alliance? Well, how would you think about it in its broad form? And more in particular, what role should the relationship play in U.S. Middle East policy? What particular roles in foreign policy would? And that's going to come back to you first as well.
Well, as I've said before, we cannot impose our will on countries in the Middle East. However, we can certainly be there as a strong negotiating partner and as an ally that encourages trust building and encourages and facilitates the peace process. Having said that, it is up to the countries of the Middle East to establish their own peace process. We can only be there as an ally in that process.
Great, thank you. Mr. Silfies?
Yeah, I would agree that we need to be a facilitator and a neutral arbiter to the process, specifically with the Israelis and the Palestinians as you're discussing. I also think that, generally speaking, I think other hotspots in the Middle East, we need to recognize that what we are doing now is not helping with a lot of these situations, like Yemen, for instance, which I know I've mentioned a couple times, but it is one of the biggest humanitarian disasters in the world at this moment. And it's connected to these issues that we're talking about in the sense that there's a proxy war happening right now in Yemen that has a lot to do with Iran, where we need to understand that when the United States and Saudi Arabia, in this case, are facilitating and giving and selling arms that are used in this war, it makes all of us less safe, ultimately. This contributes to the unrest in the Middle East. This contributes to the overall tumult in the entire region. So I think I just go back to the point that I think Israel being one of the most steadfast and sturdy governments and allies that we have, we should be working, and all of us should be trying to have more peace, not just with the Palestinians, but across the board in other places where we can help.
Mr. Nothstein.
Yes, Israel faces many military and diplomatic threats in the Middle East, as do we. And our biggest ally and our biggest partner is Israel. And that's something, as your next congressman, I want to make sure that we protect that and we strengthen that. Israel is one of our strongest allies. There's a lot of potential harm that can be done to us in the Middle East, and without having a partnership with Israel, we would be exposed to some of that potential harm as well. So this is a relationship that needs to be strengthened, and a relationship I would protect.
Great, we're going to come back to you for the lead off in this round, Mr. Nothstein. And it's going to go a little deeper in the Israeli-Palestinian relationship. What role, if any, should the United States play moving forward in the peace process between Israel and the Palestinian state?
Well, anything that can be done to get a deal done is something that I would support. Having the state of Israel and the Palestinians at a table to negotiate a deal would be a great step. As I have faith, I think it can happen. A two-state solution is something that we're going to strive for. But again, this is going to take people getting around the table to have a discussion, and it's something that I will support.
Ms. Wall?
Well, as I've said before, I don't think the United States or any other nation should try to impose a solution on the parties from the outside, but we have to encourage trust building between the parties. We have to work towards a two-party solution and assist them in doing that. And when the time comes, we have to support Israel's efforts to reach a secure peace.
And Mr. Silfies?
Yes. The way that this situation has developed over the decades, it puts us in a position where we absolutely must continue to try as much as we can to be a neutral arbiter. We need to try to bring the parties to the table. I mean, at this point, I feel like the process is it's worse than it's been in terms of communication for a long time since I've been paying attention and reporting the news. It really seems like it's ground to a halt, unfortunately, and I feel like that we need to start talking again. I mean, I guess it comes back to that notion of people talking to one another, people communicating, and not just us in our communities, but it spreads to the wider world of people working towards peace. And yes, we should be a part of it as much as we can. We can't impose solutions. We can only encourage dialogue.
Very good, thank you very much. This is going to come back to you, Mr. Silfies, first. This is a multi-part question. The folks at the Federation packed a lot into this one. So, following the U.S. withdrawal from the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, how should the United States address the threat posed by Iran in particular, and how should the U.S. proceed to prevent Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons? Additionally, is there anything you would propose to curb Iran's actions and position in the Middle East? I know that's a lot to get, but we'll turn it over to you first, Mr. Silfies.
Iran having a nuclear weapon would be a disaster for the Middle East and the world, and it's something that all of us should strive to prevent and not want. So the question is how to get there. I personally feel that we should not have pulled out of the deal. It was an imperfect deal that I didn't like a lot about. But that said, I also think that anything that we always, again, should be going towards peace as much as possible, because another wide war in the Middle East would be a total disaster for everyone involved. I also think that I worry that the more aggressive posture we take with Iran, I feel like it may be counterproductive in some ways, because Iran is unstable in many ways. They're having a currency crisis, there's a drought there, and there's a lot of unrest bubbling under the surface. There's a legitimate chance that there could be an uprising there, and that the regime could actually be overthrown, which would be great. I mean, I think clear-thinking people can agree that would be a great turn of events. So I think that that's something that we should do as much as possible. We should push for peace and accepting the situation as it is now. I mean, if we can, and I think deal with them when we have to. I mean, if we can deal with Kim Jong-un in North Korea, I think dealing with Rouhani and the powers that be in Iran is a sensible and better option than war.
Mr. Nothstein.
Yes, Israel faces a lot of challenges, perhaps none more grave than Iran. We all know Iran is the greatest state sponsor of terrorism in the entire world. It remains one of the greatest long-term threats to both Israel and the United States. It's even bigger concern that Iran supported terrorist organizations and the regime and getting and their nuclear ambitions. We cannot allow them to get a nuclear weapon. The Iran deal, the JCPA, was in my opinion, an unforgivable disaster. Did not accomplish what it was supposed to. Iran has been found to be in violation of many of the obligations of the deal. Violations that the previous administration just chose to ignore, including removal of their ballistic missile program. Plus that, after that, you throw in the $100 billion, the unfrozen assets that were being used to purchase and deploy advanced weapon systems throughout the region. Again, huge threat to Israel. At the end, it was a bad deal. That's why I fully support the president, his decision to refuse to recertify the Iran deal. Iran must not be allowed to have a nuclear weapon. We must do everything in our power to make sure that doesn't happen. We should not even let them become a threshold power in the Middle East as well. A huge threat to the state of Israel.
Ms. Wong.
Iran must never be allowed to acquire nuclear weapons capability, period, full stop. We have to have a clear and carefully thought out strategy to deal with Iran, not only with regard to nuclear weapons, but also with regard to its terror and its support for proxies that destabilize Syria and Yemen. Now that we have left the JCPOA, we have to look forward and we have to work closely with our allies, especially Israel, to ensure that Iran knows that there are going to be severe consequences for its bad activities. I want to be part of a bipartisan coalition in Congress that ensures that there is no daylight between the United States and Israel. We have to make sure that Israel maintains a qualitative military edge and that it can defend itself against Iran's proxies across the border.
Excellent, thank you, Ms. Wild. And we're going to come right back to you with this question. This will be the last question, formal question from the Federation, and we're going to move to questions gathered from the audience. So Sierra is still out there. If you have some, please submit them to our crack panel who are selecting which ones come to me. The next question is on Saudi Arabia, the other major player, or one of the major players that has emerged obviously in recent news and plays a significant role in both Israel's status in the Middle East and the Middle East situation more in general. So, Ms. Watt, what role do you see Saudi Arabia playing, and how should U.S. foreign policy address Saudi Arabia?
Well, the murder of a journalist at the Saudi consulate in Turkey is horrifying, and just as disturbing to me has been our president's equivocation about what Saudi Arabia has done. And I don't think we can look the other way. I don't think that we can forgive this act of terror. One of the greatest things about this country is that we have always stood up for free speech and for freedom of the press around the world, and we have to continue to do that. That's a hallmark of our democracy, as it is in Israel, and it's a beacon of hope to nations around the world. If we stop doing that, we will lose something very important, very fundamental to this country. So I think that we have to demand a full investigation and make it absolutely clear to the Saudis as a country that we are looking for answers and that they cannot murder journalists who are critical of their regime.
Mr. Silfies.
Yeah, the murder of Jamal Khashoggi is horrific. It's horrific, and it's something that is indicative of the regime. I mean, this is something we've known. Saudi Arabia, for decades, has been a bad actor. And the United States, Democrats and Republicans alike, have continued to have a cozy relationship with the Saudis, in spite of the fact that we realize this is a repressive regime. They export terror. I mean, the 15 of the 19 hijackers, I think, on September 11th came from Saudi Arabia. And they fund madrasas to pump out extremism around the world. They are not good actors. So I think it's the murder of Khashoggi is serving as a reminder to that, and hopefully a starting point for us to have a realistic conversation about really what that country's all about. And I think people are optimistic about bin Salman as a reformer, but this certainly brings that into question, and I think that we really should be skeptical of what kind of reform he's going to bring, and we should have our eyes open about Saudi Arabia and its role in the world.
Mr. Nothstein.
Yes, I don't have a whole lot to add. I agree with both of my opponents. Saudi Arabia is a bad actor. Eyes wide open is definitely one way we could say to go about it. But the murder of a journalist, not releasing the facts, hiding the truth from us, is something that's not allowed. So our administration, they need to come find out what happened. And the Saudis need to be held accountable for what they did, because we cannot allow this to happen anywhere in the country, and it's something that is quite sad. It's very sad.
We're going to come right back to you, Mr. Nothstein, and you're going to get the first question from the audience tonight. The question reads, in Jewish history, we have often been refugees from violence and oppression, and most horrifically, the Holocaust. What do you think of our current government's position on refugees?
Good question. America was built with immigrants. Some are refugees who came from Europe for religious freedom. Israel, very similar. The country was built by refugees. Right now, we have refugees who are wanting to come to the United States. And it's something that we're seeing in the news. It's something that we have 1,000 of them coming to us right now through Mexico. Those who are seeking asylum, we need to make a pathway for. Those who are coming to do bad things, we need to filter out. This is a tough situation. This is something that we have a great country. A lot of people want to be a part of it. But flooding the borders en masse is not the way to do it. Doing it the proper way, through the proper channels, is something I support, and this way it should be done.
Thank you. Ms. Watt.
We have to remember that thousands of Jews were turned away from our shores during the Holocaust. Contrary to my opponent's assertion and some of his advertising, I am not in favor of open borders. I believe strongly that we have to have safe and secure borders, but at the same time, we have to recognize and we have to implement a refugee program that recognizes that there is oppression throughout the world and that we have to be receptive to those people who are genuinely in need of taking refuge here in the United States. That is not inconsistent with having a safe and secure border.
Mr. Silfies.
I think whether you're talking about refugees or immigration in general, I think peaceful people who want to come to the United States, whether it be for asylum or whether it be to come to work, to open businesses, to be part of our culture and communities, should be allowed. Peaceful people, it should be easier for peaceful people to come here. And I also think that that doesn't mean that we can't have borders and we can't have security and we can't have logical screening processes for anyone who's coming into our country. But I think we should always have these processes set up with the goal of bringing peaceful people here who want to be here to contribute to our society.
Great, thank you, Mr. Silfies. We're going to come back to you with a question. This is a little more general in its nature, but what are your views on climate change?
Interesting rumble from the crowd on climate change. I hear a lot of. I think this is an example as someone who thinks of things in a nonpartisan way. I hear on the left, I hear people say climate change is an apocalyptic crisis. If we do not solve this immediately, the world's going to end. So we need to take drastic measures. Some people say that. I heard you, sir. I think there's other people on the other side who tend to say it's fake news, it's a hoax, it's not real. And I think the truth of the matter is that it is real and that we don't know how to fix it. And that a lot of the measures that have been suggested to fix it, I think, ultimately wouldn't. And even people who subscribe to the dire predictions agree that what has been suggested in various ways wouldn't be enough to even really move the needle that much about this. So what we have to be cognizant of is the unintended consequences and the additional problems we could create if we take drastic measures to combat climate change, which I agree is a threat and a problem that's going to have to be addressed. But we have to think about the unintended consequences to the economy, and we have to understand, in my opinion, human beings have an amazing amount of ingenuity and an amazing way of adapting and solving problems. And I think that the solutions to this problem are going to ultimately come from innovation in the private sector and free people figuring out ways to fight this rather than the government.
Mr. Nothstein.
Yes, clean air, clean water, less pollution, higher efficiency vehicles across the board, airplanes, trucks, we're getting there. Climate change has been happening. It's been happening for hundreds of years. anything we can do to help protect our Earth is something that's important. I myself have protected over 500 acres of land, creating open space, which creates quality air, which creates better quality of life. These are important things. They're important things to everybody. Nobody likes pollution. Nobody likes dirty water. Nobody likes dirty air. So I do like the fact that we can have private citizens find out ways to combat that, more so than the government. And I think we're on our way to that. There's quite a, we're seeing more solar power, more wind power than we ever have in a long time. These are positives. These are good things. And we're just starting to scratch the surface on that.
Ms. Wild.
Climate change is real. It's not just about air and water pollution. It's not a left-right issue, nor should it be. I don't believe we should have ever left the Paris Climate Accord. I think we have to listen to the scientists. We know that we have limited time to fix this problem. It is a huge threat to us and to our future generations. And as I stated in my opening, one of the main reasons I'm running is because of our future generations. We have to do something about climate change, and we have to do it quickly.
Very good. We're going to come right back to you as well for the next question. It's also pretty general and straightforward. What's your position on gun control?
So I am a firm believer in our entire United States Constitution, and that includes the Second Amendment. I do believe that the episodes of gun violence that we have seen in this country for the last 10, 15 years are unprecedented, and it's clear that we have to do something in the form of reasonable regulations. Most specifically, we absolutely need universal background checks at the federal level, and that is not in any way an infringement on anybody's Second Amendment rights.
Mr. Silfies.
I'm a strong supporter of the Second Amendment and the entire Constitution, and I think that these rights exist for a reason. These are God-given natural rights that are being acknowledged. They're not being given, they're being acknowledged. And the Second Amendment is one of them. The right to protect your family and your property and yourself from threat. So I think I'm not a member of the NRA, I'm not a hunter. This is something that I come at from a philosophical perspective. And I think the government needs to justify it when that right is being infringed upon. And frankly, I think that to the extent, I think solutions to violence, I don't think the solutions do come from government or can come from government. I mean, I think that we need to, again, think on our own how to address these problems in our culture. For me, it's something, I've done some soul searching as a journalist over the years, where I thought of ways that I and my colleagues could have done a better job with some mass shootings, for instance, to not obsess so much and plaster the face of mass killers on the news for 24 hours a day when one of these horrific incidents happen. I think that's something that I guess I'm not in the media anymore. As someone who used to be in the media, that's something that could have been done, to have more editorial discretion about, instead of making these people kind of anti-heroes, to focus instead on the violence itself and the news around the situation.
Mr. Nothstein.
Thank you. I am also a strong supporter of the Second Amendment. I'm a member of the NRA. I grew up hunting with my family, my father, my uncle, his friends. So guns have been a part of my life. It helps put food on the table. It's something I enjoy passing on to my children. But most importantly, it's our right to protect ourselves. And that's why I support the Second Amendment.
Very good. We're going to come right back to you, Mr. Nothstein. The question from the audience member is, what is your position on the high cost of college and the crushing student debt?
Yes, well, there's no doubt about the cost of college is skyrocketing. This is something that has been hurting a lot of students and families. The price of an education right now is just something that is unimaginable. Hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt students are taking or are and not enough high-paying jobs to pay it off. And there's several degrees that you can pay your student loans off. There's a lot of people going to school, get a degree, and only leave with debt. I think we should be pushing trade schools. I think we should be producing more plumbers, and electricians, carpet layers, air conditioner workers. There's an incredible shortage of these positions out there right now. Not everybody needs a 4-year college degree. So for me, I would push trade schools, trade schools, trade schools.
Ms. Waddle.
As I told you, I put myself through college. With the help of federal student loans, I was able to go to law school. When I graduated from law school, my loans had to be repaid at the rate of 1%. And as I said, I've long since repaid them. The government made a decent investment in me. I've gone on to have a productive career. I've participated and contributed to our economy and I pay my taxes, and all of these are things that people need the opportunity to do. I really believe that it's not just about a 4-year college education. That's absolutely right. We do have to invest in people who want to have some other higher education besides a 4-year college degree. But we have to give all of them the opportunity to do this at less expense than they are doing now. We have to give them the opportunity to renegotiate their student loan debt when they graduate. We have to give them the opportunity to have access to Pell Grant, federal Pell Grants, which are currently only available for those pursuing a 4-year college degree and not available to people who are pursuing a vocational or training education. So I just feel that it's very important. And again, it's like climate change. It's something that we need to do to invest in the future of our country, and it's short-sighted of us not to.
Mr. Silfies.
When we have a problem, we should look at why it exists. And I think we can all agree that the price of college is skyrocketing to a degree that is not sustainable. So the question is why? And the answer, in part, is because the federal government gives out so many college loans that colleges know they can keep jacking up the price of college and government will keep helping pay for it. So they keep raising the prices, and the government keeps giving out more loans, and the prices get higher and higher and higher. And what happens? The people left are students who have punishing debt, oftentimes, as my opponents have talked about, people who don't necessarily even have to have gone to college. These are people who, we do need more trade schools, and we need more people working, not just working in trades, because sometimes I think that we misidentify the situation by saying, well, someone could just be a welder, or someone could be a plumber. They could, but they could also be a welder and then open a welding business and build it and hire people. And that's a different way of looking at the economy that I think is an ultimate way to more and more growth and to address some of these ballooning costs that are not sustainable as the current situation holds.
Okay, we're going to do just a couple more questions from the audience, recognizing time, and then we'll go to closing statements from our candidates. This goes back to you, Mr. Silfies. What would you do with the Affordable Care Act, and how would you either improve it, or what would you do to replace it?
So, I think the federal government, this is a theme with me, the federal government has gotten more and more involved with our healthcare decisions over the decades. And the price, similarly to college, in fact, I think college and healthcare are two unique sectors of the economy that the prices have skyrocketed to a point that is distressing. So I think that Democrats and Republicans in different ways have centralized more of our healthcare decisions in Washington, where I think that they should be decentralized and sent more to states and to individuals and into the private sector as well, to have more options for people and more access to better care. An example I use a lot is one that I saw as a reporter of LASIK eye surgery, which LASIK eye surgery exists. Insurance doesn't pay for it. It exists in the private sector, and prices have gone down, access has gone up and the service has improved. So it's one area that I think is an example of the way free markets can help.
Great, Mr. Nothstein.
Yes, right now the ACA is the law of the land. We know that. Affordable, accessible health care to everybody, and that means people with pre-existing conditions. My opponent has a lot of commercials out there saying I will not protect pre-existing conditions. That's false. I've been on stage right next to her telling her I support pre-existing conditions. That's all part of the ACA. Healthcare is very expensive. It's something that needs to be addressed. It's not going to be addressed here tonight in a forum. Not going to be addressed in 3 months in Congress. This is a big issue to tackle. We need to figure out how to fix this problem. Healthcare has risen 123% in the last 4 years. The cost of healthcare is now more than most people's mortgages. That is alarming. So it's a huge issue. It's a huge issue I hear a lot of. But I just want to go on the record again. I will protect pre-existing conditions. I've said it numerous times. My opponent still runs the ads. And I don't think they're going to stop, but you've heard it from me here. I want to just clear the air. I will fight for pre-existing conditions. We will keep pre-existing conditions. I've said from day one, affordable, accessible health care to everybody. That means people with pre-existing conditions.
Ms. Wong.
Actually, that wasn't said from day one because my opponent's website stated until very recently that he would vote to repeal the Affordable Care Act. The Affordable Care Act was a good start. It wasn't good enough. And we absolutely must expand upon it. And we have to make it affordable. It's not that. And I would submit to you that one of the reasons that it's not affordable is because for far too long, we have allowed insurance companies to dictate our healthcare costs. And we absolutely have to do something about that. The ACA was an important first step, but we really have to continue to build on it. Right now, there are more than 275,000 people living in the Lehigh Valley with pre-existing conditions. Every Republican proposal has included elimination of coverage for pre-existing conditions. Even Charlie Dent would not vote to repeal the ACA. So, yes, I'm running to protect those pre-existing conditions and to protect the coverage for that, and to build, I hope, bipartisan consensus on health care, which is long overdue. We have a terribly broken healthcare system.
Ms. Wild, you're going to have the first crack at this question, and it's interesting, and maybe tonight is the outlier, but our political discourse is currently very polarized and civility is declining. What will you do in Congress to address the situation? How will you reach across the aisle? The first one.
One of the things I am proudest of in my career as an attorney over the last 35 years is that a big part of my job has been to resolve disputes as amicably as possible. I'm fond of telling people that when clients come into my office, and I'm a litigator, I go to court. When clients come into my office, they're usually ready to fight to the death. They want to go to trial no matter what because they're so mad at the person on the other side. And about 4 months into it, they realize that's not really what they want. What they really want is to be done with the lawyers and have some kind of resolution. So I have spent 30 years working with very difficult people on the other side of cases, and difficult judges in many cases. And what I've done is worked out compromises, negotiated. Those are the kinds of skills that I think are essential for any member of Congress. And that's one of the main reasons that I'm running, is because I think I have those qualifications. I've got proven qualifications in the area of compromise and negotiation and resolution. And people ask me, aren't you looking forward to meeting all the other members of Congress? And I always say, the people I want to meet first in Congress are the Republicans, because I know I need to work with them. And then we will work on achieving compromise.
Mr. Silfies.
I'm not a Democrat or a Republican, so that's a good start. But seriously, I mean, I think that's why I'm doing this, because I think we need independent, common sense, regular voices in Congress. That's what this is all about for me. I think that the civil war between the parties, I think, is just never ending. And the only solution to it is to put people there who don't answer to the parties and only answer to all of you. And that's what this comes down to for me. That's the bottom line of this race. And as an independent voice in Congress, I would actually think I would have more influence in the sense that I would be a swing vote. I would have either side at varying times, because I agree with both sides on different issues. I would have both sides wanting to earn my vote and our vote as a district. And I think that's a very powerful tool that could really mean a lot. And, you know, when Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats got too far out one way, I could be a check on that. And when Donald Trump and the Republicans got too far one way, I could be a check on that. I mean, I am tired of the noise from both of the parties. No offense, Marty or Susan. And I think it's time to end it.
Mr. Nothstein.
You know, I think this country has become so divided. You watch TV, what are you seeing? Mobs in the streets, violence, call for violence from leaders on both sides. You know, it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing as a nation that we're there. I too come with experience. As a county commissioner, I've worked with both sides to get bipartisan issues passed. You know, it's not a Republican or Democratic nursing home. It's a Lehigh County nursing home. It's for the citizens of Lehigh County. And how do you get that done? You get everybody around the table and you have a discussion and you compromise. You have another discussion. You compromise some more. And you don't stop until you give the people what they want. It's not what you want. As a politician, it's not about you. It's about the people you're serving, your constituents. I've been able to do that in Lehigh County. I've been able to lower taxes that way. I've been able to get big projects off the ground that way. And I figure, and I'm going to do the same thing while I'm your next congressman.
Very good. Thank you. Mr. Nothstein, we're going to move to our closing remarks, about a minute or so, and by order, Ms. Wild, you'll have the first opportunity.
Vertically challenged. Thank you, Dr. Dorick, for moderating this discussion, and thank you to the Federation for sponsoring it. Judaism teaches us that we all share in the work of Tikkun Olam, meaning for the betterment of the world. That means not only working in partnership with Israel, but it also means making sure that everyone has access to affordable health care, making sure that our seniors are able to retire with dignity and not afraid of whether they're going to have their retirement benefits and their Medicare chipped away at. It means making sure that our workers earn wages that are livable wages and that help them get ahead, and that our students aren't facing massive student loan debt, and that our environment is protected. In our system, it falls to Congress to lead on these issues, but right now that's not happening. And to change that, we have to change who we send to Washington. I'm not a politician. I'm running at the age of 61, after 35 years of a very happy legal career, to ensure that we have a government that works for everyone. I'm running because we need to stand with our allies and have a smart approach to foreign policy that reflects our interest and our values. And I'm running so that our children know that with hard work and a dream, they too can still make it in America. Thank you.
Mr. Silfies.
Thank you, everyone. It was a great night, great discussion, and I appreciate you having us here. I think at the end of the day, for me, the main question for this race is the partisan civil war in this country helping you or your family? And if the answer is no, what I would say is what I say a lot, which is if you want something different, you have to vote for something different. That's it. That is the main issue of this entire election for me. I'm sure that there are a lot of things you may have heard from me tonight that you don't agree with. I certainly know my fellow bald friend in the front row counts among that. So you might have heard things you didn't like. I understand that. You might have heard things that you did, but what you know is that I don't answer to a party. I don't answer to a president. I don't answer to donors. I answer to my principles, and I answer to you. And that's it. Thank you.
Mr. Nothstein.
I started to get up when you said that's it. I thought it was done. Thank you to the Jewish Federation of Lehigh Valley for hosting the forum tonight. Thank you to Dr. Board for moderating. And thank you to everybody who attended tonight. It was a great audience. The forum tonight was about Israel. And Israel's security and prosperity are essential for the future of the Jewish people. We need stability in the Middle East, strength of the United States, betterment of the world. All relies on our strong partnership and ally with Israel. The U.S.-Israeli relationship is and will continue to be one of the most important jobs of any congressman or woman. And as your representative in Congress, I will make certain that that relationship stays strong. Now, on November 6th, you're going to have a choice. We have an opportunity to send a new face, new energy, and new blood to Washington, D.C. I want to be your representative. I have a track record of getting things accomplished in Lehigh County. I have a track record of getting things accomplished as an athlete. I have a record of getting things accomplished as a small businessman. And I ask for your vote on November 6th. Send a congressman down to Washington, D.C. to be a representative you can all be proud of. Somebody you can trust, somebody you can count on, somebody who will never forget the people of the 7th Congressional District. Thank you.
Thank you so much, folks. Regardless of where you stand politically, what party you affiliate with, if you affiliate with a party, candidates put themselves out there. Some of it studies politics and analyzes it, polls it, and tries to figure it out. One thing I've never done is put my name on a ballot. It's hard. It's very hard to do. And so at this point, let's thank our candidates tonight for showing up. I'd like to also thank a few other entities and individuals. First of all, the Federation for putting on this event. As I said before, we hear a lot of the broad issues in a campaign. Sometimes we don't get to go into the nuance or the small items that might not get broad appeal, but for audiences are extremely important. So having this opportunity to meet was wonderful. So thank you to everybody, to Aaron and the Federation for putting this on tonight, and to JCC for hosting. Thank you for your introductions, Dr. Fells, and most importantly, thank you for spending a fall evening engaged in the very real act of democracy. Everybody have a great evening and drive safely home.